Section E, presentation and action items. E1 is the update and discussion regarding COVID-19 current and options for resuming instruction in the fall. Superintendent Trahan.
Well, thank you very much. Boy, does information sure change. And when it does, it changes quickly and may change drastically, as we're all finding out. So as we have experienced and we have been anticipating, working on our plans and creating multiple scenarios and plans, we did receive information this past week on the 15th of July from the County Office of Ed through a press release that they submitted. And then on Friday with an update from Governor Newsom. And so tonight, what we would like to do is to, we could quickly have moved into another phase of our planning for the reopening of schools in 2021. And so tonight we'd like to take everybody through that. And if I can just add to start is that on Thursday, we will be having a town hall meeting, and that will be a time where we would, of course, like to do our presentation for the town hall, but just in terms of all of the emails that we have received and or will receive to communications@rossvalleyschools.org so that we can prepare our themes to really know what it is that parents would like to have their questions answered. And then we're going to be shifting into a pretty much a Q&A session. So any emails that are received during the town hall session, that will also be live streamed. Any emails received to communications@rossvalleyschools.org, we will be addressing at that virtual town hall. And so a lot of what I'd like to do tonight to start off is to kind of address some things that are coming up in the questions from families and their wonderings about the start of next school year. So as we all know, and as everybody has seen in my communications out, is that we're prioritizing first and foremost the safety of students, staff, our parents, our community, as we are planning for next school year. We also are planning for all of our students, all TK through 8th graders. Received a couple of emails about wondering if we're offering TK. We absolutely are offering transitional kindergarten. All the way through 8th grade, and we're paying special attention to our gen ed students, our special education students, our English language learners, our students who need interventions. We're paying attention to the social emotional counseling services that we provide students in our district. And we're also looking to provide parent support to our online distance learning models that we have to start the year, as well as any family who moves into continued virtual learning for this school year. Questions have come up around daycare and also about providing student families information about students' email addresses, our phone number contacts. And so I'd like to just take a minute here to address that is the district does not provide childcare per se, but we definitely have a partnership with the YMCA as they operate our before and after school programs on the campus. And I've had a conversation with the YMCA and also will be continuing to do so. So what Tori Hughes from the YMCA wanted me to let all families know, and I'll be sharing this out separately, but for any families who are wanting and needing childcare options, if they could please email Jordan James, and his email address is jajames@ymcasf.org. Let me do it this way, jajames@ymcasf.org. And that way, if they have an interest in how many families are interested in childcare, then they can look at planning accordingly. So I think those are some things that we noticed in the communications aspect of the comments or questions or input that parents have given. And so with that, I'd like to move into tonight's presentation, knowing that we will have more time and a specific interest on Thursday to dialogue with families. All right, and Julia? All right, thank you. What we know from Dr. Matt Willis and his comments or opening comments in the press release last week is that we still have hope that we can bring students back into full-time, schools full-time, but with the current spikes we're seeing in the county and across the region, we just need more time. So as I've stated in my communications that we know that when the transmission is high, we may have to close classrooms more frequently, which may be even more disruptive than starting the school year in a distance learning mode. It gives also the time to get some more testing and frequency of testing in place in the county. We know that there's a statewide shortage of testing, and so to be able to get that that worked out. And we know that what we're guided by for however schools look in 2021 is by what's feasible, practicable, acceptable, and tailored to the needs of our community. And as I've said before, in the vein of what's safe for all involved in our community, not just students, but also staff and any family or any essential workers who need to come onto our campuses. And so the safety readiness, we know that we're at least looking at no sooner than September 8th. The actual date that we will be able to have in-person schooling isn't determined yet. We're hoping that it can be around September 8th, but until we know for sure, then we're at least planning to start the school year in full remote learning for all of our students in the district. And during the transition period of the period of time where we're in remote learning to when we may be able to return to some form of in-person learning, is that we may choose to bring small groups of students into the classroom so they can get to know their classroom. The teachers, staff can conduct academic and emotional assessments. The teachers can return into their classrooms to meet with students individually under small cohorts to prepare them for in-class instruction, to go over all of the safety protocols that we have or will have finalized and have in place. We've been working really hard on those elements too. But we know that we can't return until the Marin Public Health deems that it's safe to do so. So next slide. And so then with Governor Newsom, as of Friday the 17th, that in his address is that learning is non-negotiable. The virus will be with us for a year or more, and school districts during this time must provide meaningful instruction in the midst of a pandemic. In California, the health data will determine when a school can be physically open, and then when again it must close, if at all, but learning should never stop. Students, parents, staff, all prefer in-classroom instruction, but only if it can be done safely. And by that, he added, it wasn't in his quote here, but safe for all. And so in the governor's plan is that the safe in-person school is based on local health data. There will be strong mask requirements for anyone in school. Physical distancing and other adaptations will need to be in place, and regular testing of staff and students and dedicated contact tracing for outbreaks at school will need to be in place. And through all of the work that we're doing in preparing for resuming to in-person is that we need to have rigorous distance learning. And so schools that are located, and the reason it says schools is that it's not just the public schools, but it's all schools. So privates, charters, all schools, school districts located in counties that are on the state's monitoring list must not be physically open for in-person instruction until their county has come off the monitoring list for 14 days. So in that slide, a couple of slides ago, where it talked about that we can bring students onto campus, that is for getting them acclimated into the new school year. It is not for any kind of in-person instruction until our county has been off the state monitoring list for 14 days. So what Governor Newsom is saying is that if we all do our part to wear our face coverings, to social distance, and to remain within our own personal cohorts or bubbling, or not to mix, but to stay to stay separate, and that if we do need to be around other people, that we're wearing face coverings and that we are social distancing a minimum of 6 feet. So in schools, once we all reopen, or for school districts that, or schools that are not on the state monitoring list, then they may begin in-person instruction. There are only a few counties in the state of California that are not currently on the state monitoring list. But once we do reopen, we are open. And then there are the protocols that require in the event that a case is confirmed. And what does that mean for any classroom, a school, or a district? So following a confirmed case of a student who was at school during his or her infectious period, other exposed students and staff should be quarantined for 14 days. So that means that that classroom would, that's a student individually. A school should revert to distance learning when multiple cohorts have cases of 5% of students and staff who test positive within a 14-day period, and they must close for 14 days, and they will return to distance learning. And a district should revert to distance learning when 25% or more of its schools have been physically closed due to COVID, and they need to remain closed for 14 days. Closure decisions should be made in consultation with local health officers. And after 14 days, school districts may return to in-person instruction with the approval of a public health officer. And what we know that when we are able to have students on the campus, whether it's just for the transitional period or for in-school learning, is that all staff and students in grade 3 and above will be required to wear a mask or face covering. Students in grade 2 and below, so grade 2, 1, K, and TK, are strongly encouraged. And actually, let me just say that for a second. We do have an early childhood special day class in our district, and so that would be the same for those students, so grade 2 and below. Students should be provided a face covering if they come to school without one. And the state has delivered over 18 million face coverings. So we are in the process of getting our shipment delivered. It includes, as we've covered in the June 16th board meeting, the types of PPE, EPE that is being provided by the state. On top of that, our district is providing face shields that have a cloth drape around them, which the Marin County Health, as well as the state health, on a call I was on today, said that those are acceptable in lieu of a face covering, but just a regular mask without a drape is not. Anybody who wears just a regular mask without a drape needs to also wear a face covering. Now, we also know that there are contraindications as to when a student or a staff member would not be required to wear a face covering. And those are indicated by a medical condition and or a behavioral type of a condition that would be noted in a student's IEP, for example. But every other student should wear one. And then for the youngers, grades 2 and below, it is okay that if they're not able to wear a face covering, the state is saying that they also can wear a face shield, and not the type with the drape, but a regular face shield with those. So physical distancing, adults, and this is now the state requirements. What we know is that the county is saying that they will be updating their guidelines as well, so we're awaiting those. But in terms of what the state is currently saying is that adults need to stay 6 feet away from one another and 6 feet away from children where practicable. Students need to be 6 feet in distance from one another as practicable also. And anyone entering a school site must do a health screen, so that students and staff, let's say we had another employee from the school district who needed to go onto the campus, let's say for lawn mowing. They would also need to enter a health screen. If we had anybody from outside, let's say, for example, an air conditioning company needed to come onto the campus, then they would also have to do a health screening. So if a parent comes onto campus to pick up a child, for example, or that kind of thing, they would need to do a health screening as well. And that also guidance provides that if anyone in a student or staff member's household is sick, they need to stay home. So If a student is sick or a member of the household is sick, a staff member is sick, or a member of their household is sick, then that student and staff member should stay home as well. And then what the state is also suggesting is that once a school district is able to reopen, then there does need to be regular testing and dedicated contact tracing for outbreaks at the school. So they are working right now on ensuring that there are the contact tracers available in each of the counties who can support school districts in that effort. And on the call I was on today, there are guidelines through the public health that if there is a diagnosis, that of course people's medical will be maintained as much as practicable, but they will need to notify school districts if somebody tests positive who is in the school district. So the public health guidance is also recommending that staff in every California school be tested for COVID-19 periodically based on the local disease trends and as testing capacity allows. And that when it says the governor announced today, that was on Friday, that the state will provide resources and technical assistance for the investigations related to the contact tracing. The idea is that to find out all of the persons with whom a student or a staff member may have been in contact with, to know do they need to be recommended for quarantining and or to be tested. And then again, the rigorous distance learning. So under newly enacted law, this is related to the budget trailer bills, AB 77 and SB 98, that districts are required to provide devices and connectivity so that every child can participate in distance learning. There needs to be daily live interaction for every child with teachers and or other students. Class assignments that are challenging and equivalent to in-person instruction, and targeted supports and interventions for English learners and special education students. So those are the requirements of a rigorous distance learning program.
Yeah, I jump in?
Yeah, is that you, Julia? I think you took over, yeah.
So, hi, I'm Julia Wolcott, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and I'm going to continue the presentation here, giving you a little bit more information about distance learning standards for schools for the state of California. Most of what you see on this slide is a little bit of a repeat of what Marcy was talking about, but it's going to be important for us to be able to take student attendance. We need to know which of our students are participating and then really work towards making sure that those who aren't participating are still, that we're doing everything we can to bring them in and provide instruction. The minimum instructional minutes for this year have changed from a regular year. It is now 3 hours per day for kindergartners, 3 hours and 50 minutes for grades 1 through 3, and 4 hours for our older students. And then all of this, all the other pieces you see here on the slide we've been talking about. We really want to keep our kids engaged as much as possible. We need to make sure that our families are connected. Our Director of Technology, Sean, has done a beautiful job of providing families with Chromebooks and hotspots, and we will continue to do that moving forward. And again, that daily live interaction that is required so that students are having a connection with their teacher and with their classmates as well. And so this is a virtual unveiling of our Virtual Learning Academy in Ross Valley. We've been also calling it Distance Learning 2.0 because there really are some substantive changes that are taking place over the work that we've done in distance learning this past year. So 3 main areas of change. One would be technology tools. Our youngest kids, TK through 2nd grade, are going to be working with a different learning platform. Google Classroom is more difficult for students that are not independent learners and are younger. And Seesaw is very successful in working with young kids. Kindergartners are able to work with the program and have a little bit more independence. We're also beginning work with a company called Parent Square that is a communication platform for families. And Sean Maher, I think later on, is going to be giving more information about this. And I don't know if he's here now.
Sorry, Julia, it's actually on the consent agenda for the agreement for the board to approve Parent Square. But I can do a quick overview of that. It allows for real-time translation. And so one of the things that we wanted to do with that is to communicate with all of our non-English speaking families. And what we've been doing is translating into Spanish, but we also, of course, have other language families in our district. And in order to provide an equitable experience for them, we wanted to be sure that they had access. It also allows for school sites, so our parent clubs, the push out of our school newsletters would be through that. It also would replace Blackboard in terms of our emergency messaging system. So it allows longer text messages, for example, and also for parents who, because of the platform that Blackboard runs, you can opt out of it, and then you opt out of every aspect of the communication. So there are a lot of benefits to Parent Square. Teachers can use it in the classroom as well. So there's a lot of benefits for our whole entire district to be more and easily communicating around what's going on.
Awesome, thank you. We're also going to be using Clever, which is a feature that allows single sign-on, so that if students are working with multiple apps or multiple websites, they can have a single sign-on. And for the younger kids, they have these QR code badges so that the kids just need to show their badge and it lets them into the program. So just another way to make things run a little bit more easily for our students. We're in the process of identifying different supplemental online academic supports. Some of our schools in the past have used IXL Math. We're now going to have all of our schools using that program. Imagine Learning is a brand new learning platform, and they have a mathematics program that we're going to be offering to our 7th and 8th grade students. And there are other programs as well that we are looking at. And we're also diving into just additional teaching tools that deliver information and academics in a way that is engaging and fun for students, things like Loom and Pear Deck and Quizlet, and there are many, many more. And the people who know the best about those different tools are, of course, our teachers. And with that in mind, a big part of our professional development this year, we are creating a new role for teachers in our district, a leadership role, district distance learning coaches. And so we'll be having a coach for each grade level span, a coach for TK through 2nd grade, one for 3rd through 5th grade, and one for middle school, that will help to work with teachers, provide professional development, provide support, jump in and kind of help co-run their classrooms, their Google Classroom or their Seesaw learning platform, if they're having any kinds of difficulties or if they have questions, and also who are really looking at best practices. So for example, we all know that Zoom offers breakout sessions, but how do you effectively use those breakout rooms to, say, give students a really meaty math problem that they're maybe going to solve collaboratively with some classmates. In terms of professional development, again, we're going to be providing professional development around technology, tools and platforms and best practices. We also have a counselor that's going to be working with our teachers on trauma-informed practices, with the understanding that this pandemic is traumatic for all of us, and that we really need to support our kids. Our kids are facing a lot of changes in their lives and a lot of stress, and seeing the stress within their families. So we will be providing support there. And also the SEL work, the social emotional learning, that is so vital to our students, and has always been a big focus in Ross Valley. But we know that as we begin our year, one of the first things that we really need to focus on is creating connection and relationship with our students, and that SEL work will come into play there. With regards to our instructional program, again, we will be having daily live synchronous instruction. There will be a published weekly schedule so that families know what to expect on a daily and weekly basis. This past spring, we offered district-wide packets for our elementary age students, but in this current year, we'll have site-based materials distribution and collection. So teachers will have more customized packets that really match the teaching and learning that's happening within their classrooms, virtual or not. And they'll also be able to collect up work from students, which will help with assessment and progress monitoring. Many parents have asked if students are going to be assessed and if grades will be reported, and the answer to that is yes. Our middle school students will receive grades, and our elementary students will receive report card marks. And we are working on finding different ways to assess our students from afar. We know that it's more difficult to teach in the way that we have become accustomed and that we have embraced in terms of our teaching in Ross Valley, really wanting active and engaged learning and wanting our kids to be really just engaged in problems that create opportunity for creative thinking and critical thinking and student-to-student discourse and all of those wonderful things that take place. And we are looking for all of the ways that we can find to make that happen in our virtual learning academy. And so that's absolutely a goal of ours. And I think the caveat that I put with that is that it's not as easy to do as it is face-to-face in the classroom. I think we all know that. Absolutely, we will have an emphasis on targeted in-person support of our students with identified needs, our English language learners, our special education students, looking at meeting IEP goals through all of those meetings. And I think you'll be hearing more about that at a later board meeting. And we are looking at developing for our elementary school students home learning kits that have some of the things that they would normally find in a classroom. For example, a student whiteboard that they can use for solving math problems. And we're actually ordering some of the manipulatives that go along with our mathematics program so that the students can have a set of manipulatives in their house and do some of the really fun and engaging work that they would be doing within the physical classroom. And this is, please note the big red splash of the sample note there. This is a sample of what an elementary schedule might look like. And you should know that we have a teaching and learning team and that this team has been working on all of our learning scenarios. And our next step is really to create this kind of virtual learning academy playbook for teachers and then later on for parents to help figure out the best way to structure the day and deliver teaching and learning to our students. But in terms of what it might look like, in this scenario here, we have 3 instructional blocks in a day. This might depend on the age of the child. Older kids have more instructional minutes and are more able to sustain attention. But an instructional block would very likely include a mini lesson of direct instruction where the teacher is delivering maybe an overview of the activity or helping students to understand a concept. And then there would be work time and then a live debrief. The green portions that you see here would be delivered live, but any instruction would also be recorded so that students who need to revisit it at a later time or families that actually need to have it recorded so that they can do it the next day have that option as well. And student work time could be live, but it may or may not be live, depending on the activity. You might want students to be working in breakout rooms during work time, or it might be individual work. But that debrief where everybody comes back together is really critical. And so you can see it may go, it might be that on some days you start the day with reader's workshop, on others history, writer's workshop in science, and then mathematics. One of the things that we do know is that when you look at learning loss, there's research shows a greater learning loss in mathematics than in any of the other subjects. So we're going to have a real focus there on how to make sure that we're bringing our students forward so that they're understanding their grade level standards. Art, music, and PE will also be taking place over the course of the week. And teachers will be offering office hours with one-to-one support, and then throughout the day having as much as possible and where the county guidelines allow us to, in-person student support for our students with identified needs. And a continuation of the collegial work that needs to happen over the course of a week. the staff meetings and the grade level meetings where teachers can share strategies and lessons with one another, site-based planning and district-wide PD, introducing other technical tools or ideas to teachers that can help them with this work. And our middle school example is similar to the elementary school, but this is by period here. So our students, as you know, have the option of taking a 7-period day. So some of our students have a 7th period and some do not. And that's what this electives 2 would represent. But then the rest of the day, all of their subjects would occur during these class periods. Not sure how often, whether they would have advisory twice a week as they do now, or whether that would change. Again, understanding that advisory is a time for more social emotional work and a time for kids to connect with each other and with their teacher, and for teachers to really get a sense of how kids are doing with their distance learning. And then in the afternoon, having time for office hours, one-to-one support, students working on home assignments, and support, as always, for our students with identified needs. And I think that is the end. Do we have any questions or comments? Or Marcy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that although it looks like, as of now that we will be starting, well, I shouldn't say as of now, we will be starting in distance learning mode, that we're not stopping our work for when we can return to in-person, whenever that may be. We want to, as we always have, be completely prepared for whatever is coming our way. And so we want to be able to shift and pivot as the times require. So there, part of it is, I know families are really wanting to have specific information, specific samples of what things look like, and that kind of thing. And that's we are working on that. But one of the things too that people may have noticed is in the email that I've written, I think it was the one from the 13th, was letting people know too that we do have to have conversations with our unions and reach agreement on some of these things. And so that's we're going to be doing that simultaneous while we're planning for our virtual learning academy, which all students will start out in. We still are looking to give parents options so that when we are able to return to in-person, that the different models that we would have for in-person are also going to be available, as well as if families wish to continue in the virtual learning academy, they would be able to do that. And then we also know that there may be an interest that a family starts out, once we're able to start in-person school, in either the in-person hybrid model or in continued distance learning, and they may want to change out of that. So we would also have the opportunity for families to do that as needed. So stay tuned for more details. Things will be coming out. We're working on the planning, and we're hoping, as I mentioned, to have more time this Thursday to answer specific questions, to hear from our families, and also at some point we will be putting out information asking families to make the determination for once we are able to return to in-person, asking which families are going to want to continue. But we won't know really our in-person model until we know how many families want their students to continue in a virtual learning, because that would matter on our cohort size as well. So there's still a lot to be worked out, but I think our frame is there. And I think we're up to maybe 13 different versions of schedules in some cases that we're working on and looking at, and making sure that we can find some for elementary that are workable, as well as for White Hill. So with that, any questions or anything from trustees?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
This is Annalisa. I was going to ask a couple of questions, and one, first of all, thank you both for that presentation. That was really informative. And then thank all of the parents and community members that sent in questions and comments. That was helpful to me. And I had a couple of questions that resulted from reading through those. In particular, one from, I think that Catherine, Sean, and Henny all hinted at it, is there any plan in place for education sessions for parents as they're planning to have their kids at home, at least during the beginning part?
Yes, actually, that's a conversation that we were having today, and we were talking about perhaps our distance learning coaches being able to help us with leading some of those sessions. But also, Sean and I can make ourselves available to work with parents. But we want to make sure that as families start the year and as kids start the year, that they are comfortable with logging onto Google Classroom or Seesaw, which will be a new platform for many of our families. And just providing support where we can.
Great. I look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you. And then a couple of folks seemed to ask questions, and I'm particularly referencing Rachel, and I think it's Jean or Jean, asking about when people will know when things might change. I think that in this time of complete uncertainty, not knowing is also challenging. So I'm wondering, I know everything is uncertain, and I'm just wondering if there's a time when we'll say how things will continue after October 8th.
Or September 8th, yeah.
Sorry, September, yeah.
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to be able to see that the trends in Marin County are going down in that direction, because we do have to be off of the county watch list for 14 days in order to resume. We don't know when that will occur. We also are likely to, as other districts in Marin County have done, is to make a decision that regardless of when, because that would be a 14-day notice, and we believe that we need to provide, we feel anyway, we need to provide more time for families and our staff to be able to transition back to our in-person. And so I do believe that we'll be looking at setting a date by which we know that we still could be out longer than that, but it might be later than September 8th. That's what we're trying to work on right now, and in getting a better sense of where we are and what we may know. Because one of the difficulties is, as some families have wondered, you know, when will we know about class lists and so on. One of the difficulties we have is we can't release parent contact information until the back to school packet has gone out and they receive their acknowledgement and release form and are given the opportunity to say yes or no, do they want their information released into a directory. And even if we release that today, in the past when we've checked into it legally, we've had to wait a minimum of 21 days. The preferred is 30. And so even if we were to do that, that would put us up right against August 15th. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about is connecting with our parents who are already here to be able to say who might be students who families can connect with if they're trying to find either daycare options, or they're trying to look into becoming their own little bubble of sorts in which they then can share daycare responsibilities for when the students do return to in-person. So it might mean that a family support, different families can support each other. One of the big, of course, both sides that we always have is looking at the through the lens of equity. And for all of our students who may not have the financial resources as some of our other students, but you know, we're not able to overtly identify any students who may have anything. We just can't talk about our students and all. So we want to be sure that, again, not just because the state's requiring it, but because we believe it's necessary for all of our students to receive an education, is that we're looking at a robust learning environment for all of our students, regardless of what their situation might be.
So hang on, Marcy, this is Ann. I just want to, it sounds like that, back to the question that Annalisa was asking, we certainly won't do any in-person classes till at least the 14th. And we will give you the information if and when we can resume it as soon as we possibly can, but there isn't really an answer to that question yet, because it's all contingent on both the state taking us off the watch list and the preparations being finalized for our in-person learning.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Annalisa, did you have more questions?
Yeah, Marcy and Julia, it's Mark. I just want to ask a question about distance learning 1.0 versus 2.0. One of the observations that I've had and other parents have brought to me is that there were some teachers who were performing instruction in 1.0 and some who weren't. So for example, you might have a math class that you had when it was face-to-face and then we got shut down. And then they never received instruction from that same teacher again. Rather, they received instruction from another math teacher, even though they received assignments from their prior teacher. And I'm just curious about how the overall sort of professional development around that particular process may be different in 2.0, or is there a desire to maybe focus teachers who are stronger in presentation skills in doing more of that work, even though there might be other teachers who would be responsible for those individual classes or those individual subjects?
I would say that there's a strong desire to have our teachers collaborate as much as possible and really share best practices. And one of the conversations that we've had are things like, well, what if at, say, at the fourth grade level, if one of the fourth grade teachers at a site took on more of the mathematics and really developed that work while the other teacher took on the English language arts. So things like that could be happening. And then it's a little bit different at the middle school. Because as you know, our like a math teacher might have up to 150 kids. So again, it makes sense to collaborate and share. And, you know, part of our thinking is we have teachers that are really tech savvy and have spent a lot of time already getting to know these tech tools. They kind of love delivering instruction in that way. And we have teachers that are less familiar with the tools. And that's one of the reasons that we want to develop these distance learning coaches, and so that we can strengthen the practices of all of our teachers.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just need to.
Colleagues, are we still here?
Yes, I think we are.
Okay, sorry. Are there any more questions?
I have a small question in regard to distance learning. This is Ryan. And I heard us mention that, you know, can all students get, it's important to have access to the computers and have access to the lessons, but I think it's also important to make sure that these students have access to really good signal, good Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. I believe that a lot of these distance learnings are only as good as the Wi-Fi and the ability that these people are able to get. Do we have a way to check in, not just with giving the Chromebooks or the access to the computers, but to find out if they have good enough service to actually get these lessons?
Yes, Sean is working on that. When we were thinking that we would be able to start the year with some in person and some distance, that we knew as we've been taking the survey information from parents and getting information about who might be interested in a virtual learning option, then that Sean was working in that vein. Now that we know that it's going to be every student, he's just getting to work on that a little bit sooner than he otherwise would have, because we always knew that there would be a possibility that outbreaks in our district would cause us to have to go virtual for all students. So he is working on that. And then also that component will include some phone calling to families, because we know that we can't, and just like we did even when we went into distance learning in the spring, there were verbal check-ins with the families to see what they needed if they weren't checking in. So the sites, the teachers to start with, were checking in with their students and getting a better sense of why, if a student wasn't present when they were checking in, what might be the reason for that. And so then we were able to get some of the students connected either with devices if they didn't have them and or with an internet access. So we'll be working on that too.
Then just to throw one more little caveat at you, this is Ryan again, is we should also plan some sort of contingency for the inevitable PG&E shutoffs.
Absolutely.
Because that's so great to go along with the COVID experience. It's kind of like a twofer. But if those are extended for certain amounts of time, how we can reattach and people can make that up, maybe a little preemptive blast on that might be a thought.
Yeah, definitely. As you may all remember from the approval of the school calendar for 2021, we did build in a potential for makeup days, for whatever that might be. Maybe there's no PSPS this coming school year, a public service power shut-off, but maybe it's due to a lot of rain. So whatever might be the reason, we do have some days built in, but it's one of the elements that Julia talked about in her section 2, that if we do have some of the site packets that go home, because we do know when a power shut off, there is no internet, there's no electricity. And so there wouldn't be a way necessarily for teachers to connect on a daily basis, but at least then the students would have some things at home with them that they would be able to work on until we resume power. And we don't know if the state will approve waivers. And this is such, as you said, another layer to consider is in the event that we do have to shut down school and aren't able, we will apply for any J13 waivers, but we're just not sure what that will look like. So we are trying to plan for the potential of school closure for other reasons than COVID-19 as well.
Thank you.
Marcy and Julia, this is Wesley speaking. There was a very generous donation for a parent who arranged for the donation of some computers to the district. Have they arrived yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and how many of them were arranged to be donated?
125, I believe.
Right. Is that information readily available to our parents? You know, I just want to make sure, I mean, we went through it here in our household where we needed to go out and get a faster computer, a newer computer, because our fifth grader was using their parents' computer. But I just want to make sure that that information is out there in the event that that's a support that we can give to parents at the beginning of next school year.
Yes, absolutely. There will be information going out about that. We do have Chromebooks still left in our classrooms that the tech department has, or if they have to be ready, they will be going to get those to do exactly what we did in the spring. Because as some families may have been able to work it out at home with their existing devices, they definitely might actually need to have a device per child in their household, which maybe they didn't need to rely on. So we are anticipating more checkouts for the fall and or to continue on. So yes, that information will be coming out. We'll be gathering that information from the families who need it so that we can do a checkout procedure for them as well. Families who check them out in the spring, we're able to keep them over the summer. So the only families who return them are those who are 8th graders moving on to high school, for example, or any families who are moving out or attending a different school have returned them.
So Marcy, this is Ann. So just based on all of the information that we've heard and all of the questions that the trustees still have, and I am sure all of the questions that parents likely still have, can you send out another reminder to folks so everyone who's listening and everyone who isn't has an opportunity to put their questions to you for the town hall on Thursday?
Yes, absolutely. And we'll include tonight's PowerPoint because we do not plan to review tonight's PowerPoint. I know that in reading some of the comments in communications and or in the public comments, parents may not feel that the questions that they ask or the input that they give is read. We read every single one of them whether it's on a survey or in our public comment at Ross Valley Schools, which are for board meetings, and then our communications. We read every single one. And so the parent input is definitely really important and really valued for everything that we have are considering, and parent ideas. And I know a lot of the parents are like, here, we're waiting. Just tell us what we need to do. We're here to help you. And we know that we will be reaching out, and really we will be letting families know how they can support the schools, how they can support students. And there will be a lot of opportunities, even when we will return to in-person school. Even if we can't have volunteers on campus, there still will be plenty of opportunities for families to support. What we also know, and we're very thankful for, is the last push of the school year. Yes, was able to meet its financial goals. They came, I think, were able to meet them, or came very, very close with that last push that a couple of our family members were out there doing. So that's hugely helpful. So where families are looking at, can we donate money? Is that how we can help? We're going to be looking at a lot of ways for families to support, and like these supply boxes that are going to be distributed. That will be one way we know of that we'll be able to utilize support, just like parents do at the beginning of the year when they're getting our back to school packets together and supporting the sites for the things that they do. We'll be able to continue to utilize them. So families, we really appreciate, parents, guardians, all of your questions, your feedback. We do read every single one, and there isn't a one that is not considered. So thank you. Appreciate it, and keep them coming.
Great. And so we'll get out another invitation for that before the meeting on Thursday, during which more specific questions can be answered.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Colleagues, with the understanding that there is much more to come, does anyone have any remaining questions for this evening on this topic? No? Marcy, did you have anything else to add, or do you feel that the rest of it can happen if there is more, and of course there will always be more, on Thursday?
Yes, on Thursday and in future board meetings. We do have an item later on the agenda tonight to revisit our board calendar. And so there will be future meetings as well. So we'll be, this won't be our only town hall that we're holding this Thursday. I'm also looking to schedule a superintendent's council, which is with leadership from each of the schools. Historically, it's been parent club, site council, and yes, but we will be adding a parent from our equity group, as well as from our DLAC, which is our English language council. So looking to add and meet with some parent leadership as well. So individual parents to continue to give feedback, questions, comments to communications at rossvalleyschools.org. And the reason, it's not that I mind getting emails, I don't mind that at all, but I'm trying to make sure that everything is consolidated into one location, so that as we have various of our employees, for example, Julia, who can access communications and she can read them too. She doesn't have access to my own email. So we want to have a place where parents can put their feedback where there's more than just me who has access to them. So that's why I'd love it if people would continue to use that email version address.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ready to move on?